and thank you for joining us on Charting the Way Forward, where we deliver research-informed strategy and intelligence from across the Democratic coalition. This podcast is produced by Way to Win. I'm your host, Kerry Eleveld, and today I'm joined by...
I'm Tory Gavito. I'm president and one of the co-founders of Way to Win.
I'm Jenifer Fernandez, Ancona, co-founder and chief strategy officer at Way to Win.
All right. And we have a special guest today. And yes, a newly anointed friend of the pod. Like, this is one of the few pieces of power that I have. So every once in a while, there's only one other person, Terrence Woodbury, who's been actually named this. But today, Joe Sudbay has a new moniker, friend of the pod. He's host of State of the States on Sirius XM Progress, and my old partner in crime back in DC, and all around good guy. So welcome, Joe.
Thank you for having me again. I'm really looking forward to it.
So Joe has a lot of special insights today on a number of the things that we are talking about. He just happens, he's like that all around, like, political renaissance guy who has a little bit of an iron in the fire at all these different things. So he somehow is like in the middle of every one of these stories, which is kind of crazy. This is how I know Joe. He just always manages to like be connected to something. But Joe, you last night you posted a blue sky, a skeet, as they say, saying that you have a thesis about two different political conversations happening in the country right now. One that is happening inside the DC bubble and one outside the bubble. And you tweeted about it last night after news broke that Democrats had flipped an Iowa State Senate seat in a special election last night that Trump won by 11 points last year. Democrat Caitlin Dray overperformed Harris's showing in the district by 22 points. So tell us about your inside the Beltway, outside the Beltway thesis related to that win.
Sure. Well, I actually think it's even more focused than inside the Beltway. It's really like a bubble that exists sort of on Capitol Hill. It's among Democratic members, Democratic leaders, Democratic strategists, some of their research types. And they're in this bubble that I think doesn't really capture what's happening in the real world. When I say the real world, I mean outside of that bubble. I think the city of DC is the real world. It's a wonderful city, although under siege right now. But I have this really fortunate opportunity to speak every week to state legislative candidates who are running. And one of the things about state leg candidates, they knock doors, right? They knock doors, they talk to people. They get a sense of where their communities are. And I feel like, look, I know you guys do amazing research, and I'm married to a researcher, a PhD, who will tell me occasionally that it's interesting what I'm hearing, but it's not like, research. But it is very informative. Like a couple of years ago, after Dobbs was struck down, I was hearing people in DC saying, some of the consultant types saying, we can't really talk about abortion right now. And I was like, well, that's interesting, because every single legislative candidate I speak to who's knocking doors, that's the first thing people want to talk about. So I actually had an opportunity to speak with Caitlin Dray, who won the special election last night in Iowa, Senate District 1. You mentioned the number. It's like a 23 point flip on that district. And she was knocking doors. And it was funny. I talked to her twice. The first time she had just been picked to run. And she said, I can't wait to start knocking doors. And it's really funny how often I hear that from candidates who are like, I can't wait to go knock doors. So I talked to her this past weekend, and she had knocked hundreds of doors. And the consistent theme she heard was affordability. People were worried about affordability. People were worried about, childcare, housing costs. They're worried about education. The education system in that state has been gutted. Really, like, kind of, I guess you'd call kitchen table issues. But there was also a theme that I've heard from her and from others, that people are just generally worried about where things are in the country. And I feel like, and it's one of the things I get to guest host on Sirius XM Progress a lot. And actually all three of you have been my guests over the years, which is always fun. And the past, I was like, for example, I was on the air the day of the No Kings protest, and we did live coverage. I got nonstop calls, people calling in, how excited they were, how energized they were, whether they're in small towns, rural communities, suburban communities, just energized, and they're ready to fight. And that's one of the things I pick up from state leg candidates. They're ready to fight. They understand the dangers that suppose I'm talking to a lot of candidates from Virginia. Virginia's hugely impacted by what Trump is doing, both the Medicaid cuts and the Doge cuts and cuts to federal policy. Those conversations come up a lot too. And I kind of feel like, there's this almost whatever is happening in this DC bubble, it's kind of disconnected from reality. And it almost sounds, every time I hear, I'll just use Hakeem Jeffries this weekend, I heard him talk and I was like, dude, what are you doing? Who's giving you your information? And how can you not kind of understand the moment we're in? And I just kind of feel like that happens a lot in DC, that there's a disconnect between kind of the Democratic leadership and the people that are advising them and kind of what's happening out on the ground.
Just to clarify, he was asked, right, about, it was on CNN. He was asked about, I think, the DC occupation. I mean, they probably didn't say occupation, but the National Guards being deployed, Guard troops being deployed there with guns now. Yeah. And he called it a distraction, right? Mm-hmm. It's like it's a distraction from, the affordability crisis and all that. I mean, that's not exactly what he said, but it's close. So he basically pivoted off of the DC occupation to simply talk about affordability issues. And so that's part of, like you're saying, that is a little bit different than what people are. I mean, people clearly on the doors to Caitlin Dray were talking about affordability issues, but you're saying that they're aware of a bigger narrative too.
Yeah, I think they're aware of a bigger narrative. And I think they also want to see people who are willing to fight for them. And I feel like that's been missing in Democratic leadership. In the idea that they understand the moment we're in. And when there's talking about the affordability crisis, you can talk about it and you can say, oh, we have an affordability crisis. And then there's actually talking to people who like in Iowa, Caitlin made a great point. They're living under a double Republican trifecta. In the state, Kim Reynolds and Republicans have decimated the schools. They've done vouchers. That's a real problem. They want solutions to that. They want someone who's going to fight for them. And, I talked to several of the other candidates who had special elections yesterday too. Chris Schultz out in Assembly District 63, Riverside County, California. That's a tough district, but he was out there knocking doors, talking. Deborah Shigley down in Georgia, she overperformed. She has to be in a runoff in Georgia, North Fulton and Cherokee County, and she overperformed in Fulton County. And I think that's the other piece of it that I think is more important, is important, Kerry, is in addition to the issue conversation, is the idea that exists sort of in this DC kind of bubble that includes the pundits, that somehow everyone is fretting in DC, and there's this concern, and it's why you hear, I think Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer, stick very close to the talking points. They're so worried about, where the Democratic Party is and the power of Donald Trump. But when you get outside, what's happening? The overperformance in special elections, I think the down ballot has estimated it's about 16% right now. So that's the other key piece of it. It's kind of that conversation. There's two kind of conversations. If you're in DC and there are articles this week, from Politico saying, oh, Democrats don't know how to talk about crime and Democrats don't know how to do this. And Democrats, it started early this year, right before some special elections in Virginia. The CNN, New York Times, Politico were all wondering, will Democrats lose these special elections in Virginia? Democrats overperformed, and the ones that they should have, all of them, including one that a Republican the Republican won, but the Democrat overperformed greatly. And it's been a theme in DC. Somehow they've imputed all this power to Donald Trump. And I feel like there's so many of kind of the Democratic infrastructure that believes that, and they spend their time fretting about that, when out in the elections that we're seeing, statewide election in April in Wisconsin, Elon Musk was going to deliver that Supreme Court seat to the Republicans, and it was a blowout. So I think it's a two-part thing. One is the kind of the conversation about issues and how you're addressing them, and that may be consistent, but there still seems to be this kind of mindset in this bubble here that things are really dire for Democrats, and there's a lot of fretting. And how do we talk about this? And we don't know how to talk about this. And they're still stuck in, I call it the 2024 mindset, the November of 2024 mindset. Immigration is a good example. I know it's an issue you all work on very closely and very deeply. But New Democrats just issued a new policy, their policy statement on immigration this week. And I read it and I was like, this sounds like something we would have seen in 2024. It was all about border security, and it didn't address the fact that there's concentration camps, and Stephen Miller got $50 billion for concentration camps. So that's another example of kind of what I mean. Like how can you miss this moment of where people are, the freak out that people are having? And look at Trump's numbers on immigration. They're horrible. But they're horrible because people are seeing what he's doing and what's happening in their own communities. Anyways, I've gone on kind of long. I hope that makes sense.
Go ahead, Tory.
Question before we super pivot, but just on this tension between affordability, kitchen table issues that are clearly, I mean, everywhere we go, we're hearing this, that people are so concerned about oncoming recession, collapse of our economy. I mean, these tariffs eventually are going to play out, and it's going to break a lot of things. So like I hear the kitchen table issue, and then also this, you said this concern about the state of America and just this culture war that we're stuck in. I think people understand increasingly that we are pawns in a big tech social media experiment that's like pitting us against each other. I feel like that's increasingly clear. And so if you're in this culture war and we really want to focus on like the kitchen table, how specifically did Caitlin, the candidate that just won in Iowa, thread that needle? Like, how does she talk? Do you have examples? I don't follow Iowa advertising the way like I do maybe like the Southwest states. I'm curious what you saw her do.
Go ahead.
I'll give you a chance, Joe, but let me there was this specific thing that her opponent, Christopher Prosh, ran an ad showing an old picture of her, in pink hair and saying she had kooky ideas and falsely claiming that she was open borders. And she went directly at that and did an ad saying, I think I looked great in my pink hair, but the upkeep was exhausting. And then she went on to say, my kooky ideas are fully funding our public schools, making housing and childcare more affordable, and putting more money back in the pockets of working Iowans. So she went straight at it. I mean, directly to your question, Tory. She was like, okay, you're going to come at me about pink hair? I'll come back. Right. So, Joe, go ahead, please.
And I was just going to say that exact thing, too. She didn't play on Republican turf, which is, I think, so often what feels like is happening in Washington. She said, I'm not going to hide who I am. And she owned it. And and then she pivoted, like you said, right to the issues that people are caring about. And like I said, affordability is an issue that came up it's coming up with every candidate I speak with, and everyone, some are incumbents, and I get to talk to 2 or 3 every week. But there is also, Tory, that through line of people are worried, people are concerned about the state of the nation and what it means, and that's a kitchen table issue. Look, I'll say in my household, right? Kerry knows my husband Carlos. Last week, when the occupation started in D.C., we had a conversation about Carlos's parents are Mexican immigrants. He's Latino. And we had a conversation about, should you start carrying your passport around with you when you're walking to work and going around? That's a kitchen table issue in our household. And so everyone is having kitchen table issue conversations about rising costs, for sure, cost of housing, cost of childcare, which is just really hard for people. They know things are getting more expensive, and I kind of feel like that's one of the things that is happening that hasn't really kind of penetrated DC. I don't know if I'm explaining this right, but last week I talked to Jess Piper, who runs she has a Substack called The View from Rural Missouri. She's terrific, and runs an organization called Blue Missouri, and she did a post on the cost of burgers, how much hamburger costs, and I had her on the show, and I started getting calls from people because I was guest hosting on Sirius last week, talking about the cost and going to the grocery store and how things had increased. So I kind of feel like, there's this kind of like big picture conversation. Oh, tariffs are going to hit, and then as people are going to grocery shopping, they're seeing it. That's a kitchen table issue. But I also felt like, when people used to say, well, we don't really want to talk about abortion or or some of these other issues. We want to talk about kitchen table issues. Well, deciding to have a kid is a kitchen table issue. Healthcare costs are a kitchen table issue. All of those things are kitchen table issue, and they provide Democrats opportunities to talk about how things are happening and how things tie together.
Jen, this just makes me think, because in all of the research, the polling, the focus groups that we've done since the election last year, what we hear is a theme over and over again. I mean, we definitely hear the affordability crisis, right? Absolutely. But the other thing we hear from a more like cultural touchy-feely standpoint is we want to see people fight for us. We want fighters. You were the one who said they want fighters, not folders, right? And
Right.
This is what I'm hearing come up. I wonder if you could just touch on that for a second. I mean, maybe Democrats aren't doing so great, as good as they want to be, because they're running from issues rather than at them sometimes.
Yeah, it's also like what we like to say is Democrats just need to be able to talk about anything. You can't choose what people are seeing in the world. You can't necessarily choose what's salient. We saw that in different election cycles like 2022, when like you said, it was about abortion and people wanted it to be about, or like the right wanted it to be about inflation, but we were able to make it's about abortion because that's what people are talking about. So there's just a way, I think, that Democrats have to be stop shying away from just talking about what's going on and thinking they have to use these perfect talking points and this message testing. I'm a big believer in message testing, of course, because it's important to understand how things land, but it should not prevent us as Democratic leaders from, like you say, like showing up and fighting for people. Like, people are in the streets in all of DC because it's upsetting to feel your city be invaded. Leaders should be able to talk about that and not feel like they have to say, oh, this is just a distraction from the tariffs or the kitchen table issues. So I really do believe that the whole we must be only laser focused on kitchen table issues is such a mistake. It's such a strategic mistake in this particular moment.
It's their job as leaders to make sense of the world, to explain what's happening, why it's happening, who's to blame, why it serves their interests. Last I checked, the economy in DC was heavily impacted by Doge, right?
Yep.
So many people lost their jobs, are still looking for jobs, which had a trickle-down effect across the ecosystem in DC. Restaurants, barbershops, whatever, little stores, right? Like mom and pop got real hit by Doge cuts in DC. So as the need increases, as the severity of the economic condition increases in DC, it's going to have an impact on the whole community. And now you're throwing in tanks on top of that. Whose interest is that serving? And absolutely people who live there part-time as leaders, even if they're not from there, like Hakeem Jeffries, should be able to say, this is not working. This is not working for us. And I don't know why they're not more angry about it.
One thing I think, and going back to being able to talk about state leg candidates, is actually knock doors. So, if you're on CNN, you can take a question and you can pivot away, and you're not going to get a follow-up. When you knock on someone's door, you have to be authentic. You can't come in with your talking points, and you have to be able to have conversations about what concerns people. And I feel like it makes some of these candidates so much better. It's interesting. I'll have spoken to someone a couple of years ago, and then I talked to them again, and I realized they have just really gotten good at interacting with people. People want to know their issues are being heard. And when you knock on someone's door, there's a vulnerability to it, but there has to be an authenticity. And I feel like that's when you convey to people that you want to be on their side, you want to fight for them, you understand their concerns. And I think sometimes that gets lost. I mean, I hear a lot of conversations, like literally there was a meeting like in the spring about a bunch of centrists saying, we have to get out and talk to people in the real world. I'm like, there are actually Democrats who are city councilors, town councilors, county folks. They are state legislators. They live in their communities. They talk to people every day. They have to. They can't escape it. When you go to I was talking to the House leader, Robert Reeves from North Carolina, a couple weeks ago, and he was talking about going to the grocery store and people coming up to him and talking about people who'd lost jobs because of Doge cuts, right? Like, you're in the community. It's different. It's different than I think what a lot of people in DC experience. They don't have big staffs, and you have to be real. You just have to be real.
We talk about people being terminally online. I mean, it sounds like being terminally in DC, right? That's a DC problem, is like, we don't know how to talk to people, and we're going to tell you, you need to talk to real people. Well, the state leg candidates you're talking to are talking to real people, right?
I think it's also the structure. I mean, it's not the place, it's the structure of the economy of the industry, right? So that's fair. Hakeem Jeffries probably spends more time talking to donors than walking doors. And it's his job. Like, right. Of course he has to do that because he's fundraising for an entire caucus, right? And so he's probably walking into a very confusing set of coastal elite conversations with New York donors who are attempting to make sense of the Mamdani moment, and California donors who are attempting to make sense of the tech oligarchy really shifting from kind of pro-democracy to not totally. So like, he's in these very complex elite conversations and balancing those interests. And, it's the nature of the beast. Yes.
Very good point. It's a very good point.
It's a very fair point too.
Yeah. Before we leave Iowa, I just want to note that in the 4 special elections this year, they've, every one of them has seen very similar Democratic over performances by 22 points last night, by 24 points, by 25 points, by 26 points. Not all of those were flips. I think 2 of them were flips and 2 of them were not, but they were all over performances. Joe.
Yeah. The first flip was early in the year, January. Mike Zimmer won a seat that was vacated because Kim Reynolds pulled the Republican senator to be her lieutenant governor, creating an opening. It was like a Trump plus 24 seat. Mike Zimmer, I talked to him, just the most decent human being. And I want to tell you something, and this again is counter to, this was January, like when everyone in DC was freaking out. Oh, we lost because of trans issues. We lost because of immigration. Mike Zimmer's social media, he ran on Iowa values. He touted the fact that Iowa was one of the first states to provide protections for sexual orientation and gender identity. He talked to me. He brought it up. He brought up the fact that he's an educator, and they were having an issue with, students who were questioning, were transgender or trying to figure it out. They set up a separate bathroom. They just let them use the teacher's lounge. It wasn't a big deal. They were thinking about the kids first and foremost. So I think it's really interesting because there's a sense, well, certainly if they're running in Iowa, they're not talking about that stuff. He didn't make it front and center, but he didn't shy away from it. The social media post the day before his election was Iowa values were the second state to legalize same-sex marriage. So I think it's really important to understand, these are people who were, and he's out in this community. People knew him. They were talking about a lot of issues, and this stuff comes up, and he didn't shy from it. So I just like to bring it up.
I have to ask then, is there any chance that, Iowa's U.S. Senate seat, currently held by Joni Ernst, is on the map now, or is that a pipe dream?
What?
You heard it here first, folks. Dead silence.
I'll jump into this. So JD Schultz is a good friend. He actually jumped into the race right after she said we're all going to die. He since has dropped out. But, people who know Iowa, Iowa was never this red until recently. And the Republican trifecta has really devastated the state in terms of education, which they used to be very proud of. Iowa is 51st, like in maternal healthcare providers. It's crazy because this is not how the state views itself. Joni Ernst has been a little squirrely about what she's moving forward on. Kim Reynolds is not running for re-election again. There's a great candidate for governor, Rob Sands, on the Democratic side. I think war is in play. I think we're closer to 2018 than we are to 2024 or 2020 in terms of what could happen. So I think there could be surprises, and those voters in that state, something is different, and Democrats are energized, and that's really important.
It's reminding me of Sam Brown back in Kansas. You turn him loose on a state for long enough, and eventually you get a Democratic governor. So I don't know.
Zach Walls dropped out.
Wait, Jen, lift up the voice.
Oh, you can't hear me? Sorry.
Sort of. You're just a little low.
I'm in the wrong things. Never mind. Carry on.
Okay. I think she was wondering if Zach Walls dropped out. Who do we have? We have 3 people.
Zach Walls. Christ, I don't remember the other guys' names, but there. I think there's one other woman and another state rep. The other state rep from Western Iowa, Democrat. I'll look while we're talking, but
okay.
Yeah. They've got a healthy field too, which is also a good sign. I think when you have multiple Democrats deciding that, multiple Democrats don't say, I'm going to get into a primary to run for, there's something happening there.
Tory, did you have a thought, or should we move into another realm?
Well,
here?
I'm obsessed with corn states. I mean, I feel like I don't feel like Democrats do enough economic analysis in addition to electoral analysis, and the way the tariffs and the Doge cuts and the BBB is landing on different communities will open up opportunities at the same time that in states like Arizona that are going to benefit from massive build outs of ICE enforcement, it's going to be a little bit more challenging to kind of wrest those voters away from thinking that that's good for them, So like, there's more analysis that we should be putting into where we find strange bedfellows and unique opportunities to pick up. I will say though, I think it's of interest for Democrats to run Democrats even in hard places and not necessarily back straight independents, because even though independents might have a better shot at places like those specials in Nebraska or whatever, it doesn't do a whole lot to build that brand back up of we need Democrats who fight. I want those independents to be joining the Democratic Party saying, we are the new Democratic Party. This is the fight. We're leaning in.
Yeah. So I wanted to move on, so thinking about this bubble, I kind of saw Joe's tweet and then started sort of thinking about this DC bubble, or not so much DC bubble as like a Capitol Hill bubble or a Dem leadership bubble, and Hakeem Jeffries sort of pivoting. But what we see among the governors in California, like we had Philip Bump on a couple episodes ago, and he was talking about, he basically was like, where are the entrepreneurial Democrats? Why aren't people stepping into the leadership void here? Why aren't people, and I kind of feel like what happened with the Texas redistricting and the Democrats making a real stand there. And, Tory, the Texas Democrats should be super proud of that. Is that you saw California Governor Gavin Newsom really get the ball rolling last week with an aggressive response to Texas Republicans' mid-cycle round of gerrymanders. This week, we're hearing from other governors who I clearly have an eye on running for president. But let's just hear, we've got, I think, queued up both Tim Walz, Governor Tim Walz of Minnesota, and J.B. Pritzker of Illinois. giving some sound bites about the current state of the country and Donald Trump's very, aggressive use of federal force.
But I am willing to say each and every one of us are unified around the idea that this cruelty must end. This slow rolling attempt at undermining democracy, and I always get in trouble for it, and I'll continue to say it. I don't think we do any favors when we don't name it. These are fascist policies meant to take away our. That is what they are.
Okay.
Today in the Oval Office, Donald Trump looked at the assembled cameras and asked for me personally to say, Mr. President, can you do us the honor of protecting our city? Instead, I say, Mr. President, do not come to Chicago. You are neither wanted here nor needed here. Your remarks about this effort over the last several weeks have betrayed a continuing slip in your mental faculties and are not fit for the auspicious office that you occupy. Most alarming, you seem to lack any appropriate concern as our commander-in-chief for the members of the military that you would so callously deploy as pawns in your ever more alarming grabs for power.
Okay, so Pritzker there went on to, and we couldn't quite get this audio because it just didn't work out quite right, but he went on there to issue a threat and quote unquote, he was talking to the officials within the Trump cabinet and within the Trump administration, federal officials, and he specifically said, I just want you to know, quote, if you hurt my people, nothing will stop me, not time or political circumstance, from making sure that you face justice under our constitutional rule of law. So he followed up, don't come here, with an actual threat. And we all know that, like, to some extent, Trump is now above the law. But what he's reminding all the civil servants is they're not above the law. They are protected by the umbrella of Trump right now in the White House, but they could down the line be under prosecutorial, in jeopardy. So I am wondering from this group of very informed panelists, is this good politics?
Go for it, Joe.
I've been thinking about this all day, right? Like I've been doing my PT, walking my dog, and thinking about all the things I wanted to say. So thanks for indulging me. But I think it goes to what we were talking a little bit about before, kind of this inside the bubble versus outside the bubble. The fighters we're seeing are coming from outside. The Democratic state reps in Texas. I mean, I stayed up late that night to watch the press conference in Chicago. I'm a geek, admittedly, but all of them, Leader Wu and the others, and then Governor Pritzker. Certainly Governor Newsom, don't always love him, but on some of this stuff, he's been great. Governor Hochul has actually been really good. And then Governor Walz, I think we needed to see that fight. And that's what we were talking about, the level they're willing to fight for us. Mayors too. Mayor Wu in Boston has been kick-ass.
Yeah, she's been going viral.
Right? So I feel like that's the fight people want. And you can see from their reaction. I mean, how many people, I can't tell how many people asked me if I saw Pritzker's, my kind of, even like my family, people around were like, did you see Pritzker? Did you see Pritzker? That speech, that 12-minute speech resonated. Governor Walz, the same thing this week. And I think we kind of needed it because that all happened, I think, Monday, those speeches, when we really needed to see that there were people fighting for us. And we haven't seen it so much from leaders in D.C.
Yeah. I was just going to say, I think it's good politics for our theory of change, which is that in order to win, we have to actually build a broader coalition of people who have checked out because they've seen so many Democrats not fighting for them, not standing with them, not standing up to Trump. I mean, we had someone in one of the focus groups say, I'll support whoever I see punches Trump in the face next. Like, I think he means metaphorically, not literally, but like that is what you see happen, right? Maybe both, but that is what you see happen with Gavin. Gavin is not a very popular politician generally in our circles, but people are seeing what he's doing with all the trolling and kind of getting under Trump's skin, and that feels like punching Trump in the face. That's what I want to see. You know, people who've been sitting on the sidelines because they haven't felt seen by the Democratic Party leadership, and when they see these talking points out of Hakeem Jeffries and others that feel so detached from what's happening, it does not make them want to get up off the couch. So I think it is the good politics for going forward. It's not what we've seen in the past, but it's what we need to do going, next.
I'll just add too, I'm coming home from a little bit of a round of meeting folks in New York City, meeting different Way to Win members who fund some of our work. And I'll tell you, one of the most common questions I'm getting is, are we going to have free and fair elections in 2026? It's the most common question that I've been receiving from people who genuinely care about democracy and about the economy and about movements and about Democrats and just wanting to see this country move forward. And I think that the fighting back is part of how we maintain free and fair elections in 2026. If Trump tests all these pressure tests, from rolling out enforcement in major cities, rolling out tanks, rolling out mid-decade redistricting, rolling out, it's all pressure tests. And if we just let it go, how are we going to stand up for the biggest fights when it matters the most in the season, in the election season? So I think it's part of it.
Yeah.
If they don't, I gotta say, if they don't see, if to your point, Tory, if they don't see any pushback, they just keep rolling. And the only reason that Kilmar Abrego Garcia, now I know he's back in federal custody again, I believe. I mean, that's such a quick moving story. But the only reason he's back in the States at all was because there was actual pressure, because Senator Van Hollen went over there and met with him and made it a big story and whatever. The only reason that that I think most of that original airplane full of people have been, at least people who are not Salvadoran, have been either deported to Venezuela or come back to the States, is because they even in El Salvador, there was pressure not to keep the U.S. U.S. folks there, or people who weren't of Salvadoran citizenship. I mean, that is all social pressure that for that reason. Now, that's an ongoing fight. But to your point, Tory, without people raising the stakes and without the social pressure, then it's just, they just keep going.
Yeah. I'll tell you, the one thing that has given me life, a couple of things have given me life, but one is a reaction from people in the community in DC when ICE agents are storming around. The National Guard, not so much, because they're picking up trash, really. That's what they're doing right now. They haven't moved into the neighborhood so much. I think they're waiting for some confrontation. But ICE agents and CBP and DEA, the videos are amazing of people who are fighting back and letting them have it and letting them know how unwelcome they are. And I'll tell you, the other thing that's happening is grand juries are not indicting the sandwich guy, the sandwich hero, who everyone knows now. Like, there were posters of him all over town. Wasn't indicted on felony charges. People are using their power where they have in showing a fight. And that's why they're looking for fighters in their leaders too. So yeah, I think it's been.
I hadn't heard that story, and as a recovering lawyer, I can tell you, everybody says DAs can use grand juries to indict a ham sandwich. I thought you were making some kind of pun, but you're talking about the actual sandwich guy that threw a sandwich at I don't even know what kind of military it was.
I think it was FBI.
Yeah. Okay. And they didn't indict. Oh, that's wild.
No, I mean, to your point, Tory, I was listening to it on NPR, and they were reminding us that, like, if you're the prosecutor in that situation, you get to present all the evidence you want, and the defense lawyer can't present anything, which is why you can usually indict a ham sandwich. But in this case, the DC residents were like, no, I don't think so. I'm not seeing the felony indictment here, so it's interesting.
Oh, I think it's great. And you know what? We've seen some of it in LA too. Bill Assaley, who was an assembly member who became the U.S. attorney out there, some of his grand jury indictments are being turned down. LA Times was reporting he was screaming at his lawyers because it doesn't, like you said, Tory, it doesn't happen. So I take great glee in that. The other thing I'm going to say I take great glee in is Susan Collins did an event in Maine yesterday. I'm a Mainer. She does events. I have watched the videos. People keep sending me these too because they know I have a certain disdain for her. People were screaming at her and she's like, let me talk. Just listen to me. And they're like, no, you listen to us. You never listen to us. And chanting shame. Look, I took great glee in it. And I want more of that.
This is a perfect transition because we were going to get into Maine. And since you're a Mainer and since you basically started your political career by, running some campaigns in Maine. So you know the landscape there. Tell us about Susan. First of all, let's start with, we're going to obviously get to Graham Plattner. We cannot not get to Graham Plattner, but is Susan Collins beatable in your estimation? I'm not saying will we win. I'm saying, is she beatable?
Yes. And I think there's this mythology that's been built up around her, a lot of it from DC media, but also the main media. I mean, she's remarkably thin-skinned. I'll just tell you my Susan Collins story. Back when we were doing Don't Ask, Don't Tell repeal in 2010, Kerry remembers this well. I mean, I actually got into a tussle with Obama. I mean, Obama got into a tussle with me. He started it. Kerry was there. He started it. But that's another story. But I was pushing Susan Collins. She was supposed to be this great LGBTQ champion, and she was going along with the filibuster. So finally, at the end, it passed. Miraculously, we didn't expect it. I was at the bill signing. The
repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. Right, we're ending the gay ban in 2010. That passed. So sorry, I'm just adding a little detail. You know it so well that you just kind of.
Oh yeah, that's what I do. Yeah, and that's why you're a real reporter, because you know how to fix it. But so we went to the bill signing, and to the credit of the Obama administration, they invited all the troublemakers, the people who gotten arrested on the fence and everything. I see Susan Collins in the hallway, and I just kind of go up to her and I say, hey, I'm from Maine. Thanks for your help at the end, because she only helped at the end. And she said, oh, what's your name? And I said, oh, my name's Joe Sudbay. She said, you're the one that writes all those mean things about me. I was writing on a gay blog. Like, she should not know me, but that's how thin-skinned she is. And she's got that reputation in Maine. Just a little color about who she is. So her people scream at anyone in the media who gives her a hard time. But when I actually am writing a piece right now, I don't know where it's going to publish, but her campaigns, she won in 96 against someone who never should have run. 2002, terrible year for Democrats, right? 2008, she should have won. She should have lost. That was a great year for Democrats. Her opponent told me he couldn't bring up issues like Iraq war and her ties to George Bush, whose numbers were like in the 30s, and the financial, because his consultant told him people don't like negative campaigning. 2014, she was a terrible year for Democrats. She had a great opponent, but she didn't win. She couldn't win. It was just a bad year for Dems, right? So and then 2020, I thought there was a good chance to defeat her. I really feel like Sarah Gideon could have been a great candidate, but she was advised the campaign wasn't an authentic Maine campaign. I can't describe it any better than that. Susan Collins knows how to run a campaign, and Maine knows how to work the Maine media. So she's had a combination of running against candidates who didn't challenge her the right way and running in bad years. And that's why I think this year could be different. First of all, her approval rating's in the tank. In 2020, she had voted for Kavanaugh, but Roe hadn't been overturned. So I think we're in a very different place this year. So anyways, I can go too far deep into stuff in Maine. I know. Thanks for indulging me.
Well, we were going to do the whole episode on Maine, but then decided to pivot to other stuff. Just kidding. That was a joke. But you are a legit Maine expert. I'll say this. So for anyone who's been kind of living under a rock a little bit or hasn't been super into what's happening in Maine, there's this new entrant on the scene, Graham Plattner, a veteran, an oyster farmer who looks a lot like the brawny paper towel dude. His campaign, he has that look on it of him. His campaign launch went viral, and he's definitely turning heads. He's already said he's a no on Schumer as leader. This week, he accused Collins of running a scam, quote unquote, on Mainers as a supposedly moderate politician. I mean, he's kind of a dreamy, outsider candidate. So, and we still don't know if Janet Mills, the current governor, right? She's current. Janet Mills is going to throw her hat in the ring. So I don't know. What do you make of this right now, Joe?
So, how I told you how I kept getting the videos from Pritzker? Everyone was so excited. Last week, it was Blattner's video. Everyone I know was sending it to me. It was everywhere. Like, it was all online. It was created quite a buzz. Certainly nationally, got a lot of attention nationally, people in the state. I don't know him. One of my friends knew him, and she had given me a heads up that he was going to enter the race. I was kind of blown away by his video and his comments since then. Someone asked him his views on LGBT issues. He said, "No one will stand in my way if anyone attacks that community." And there's just a kind of honesty about him, an authenticity, that word that has come up before. And the other thing is, it's really interesting. One of the local newspapers did an article on his oysters, and his oysters are actually really good. Like, they're highly sought after in Maine restaurants. And Maine is a really foodie state. I mean, it's kind of funny you don't think of it that way, but it's a very foodie state. So it kind of goes to what I was saying. She's only run against politicians in the past. I think the idea of running against him probably would freak out her team. They know how to run against Democratic politicians. I don't think they'd know how to run against this guy. I think they'd run every negative thing in the book. But, he's ready for a fight. He strikes me as a fighter. I don't know how he'll do once he gets out on the campaign trail. I've seriously only heard good things about him. So.
Yeah, me too. I mean, it seems like he's already starting to do that thing where he got all this attention online, and now it's starting to translate into on the ground, where every place he goes is getting big crowds and people drawing in, and he's kind of building that base. So his campaign is being run by some of the same people who are running Mamdani's campaign. And I think they are applying those same sort of tactics, where it's a combination of like a really strong social media strategy and a strong on the ground strategy. So I'm interested to see how it plays out in somewhere very different from New York City, of course. And I think he, as a candidate, in my view, is doing two things that are really important. One is just like being very clear what side he's on when it comes to this big question of the rich having too much, inequality being too out of whack. He's not avoiding that. He's not focusing on kitchen table only. He's actually making a statement about oligarchy, which I think is really important. And then number two, he's positioning as an independent kind of outside of the Democratic Party. He's not, like wrapping himself in a Democratic Party sort of banner, but he's also not compromising Democratic Party values. And he's coming out and saying what he supports. He's saying he can win without compromising the things that we care about and the values that we all hold as Democrats on social issues, anywhere from abortion to LGBT issues as well. So I think that's really what's exciting.
Yeah,
I do think it sounds to me too, and correct me if I have this wrong, but he's actually, he is positioning himself as outside of the Democratic Party to some extent, but he's also like kind of like this. We need to get the Democratic Party back to what it was. Like, he's not like trashing the party completely. He's just like, I'm doing something different than the direction the party's gone, but like, we need to get back to where we were the champions of the working class. That's the sense that I got when I looked. So, it's not like Osborne. Oh,
For people listening, we have a brawny towel picture next to Graham here. It's hilarious.
I just want to, you have to go to our YouTube account and check this out, because there is a side-by-side of Graham Plattner and the brawny dude. And, I think there's a real likeness there. I'd like to say that I've been proven correct. That's Dan Ancona's work behind the scenes. So thank you, Dan. Appreciate that.
It does make me a little, it's like, I'm hearing there's a difference between being an outsider and an independent, right? Like there's a difference. And it gives me a little bit of worry or note to take around like our gubernatorial and Senate incumbents in places like Arizona, Nevada, Georgia, that all those places are going to count as we get towards 26, that they're not these fresh outsiders. They're more incumbents who grew up in the Obama era and understood the tactics of the Obama era and like very efficient field models and, very carefully constructed kind of personas. That it's just a different era that Mamdani and like Platter are making these contrasts. And so, I guess I'm just saying, if anyone's listening from Arizona or if anybody's listening from Georgia, maybe take some notes, maybe shake up your teams a little bit and figure out how we get out of these old models.
Yeah.
I will have to say the thing about Plattner too is, even just looking at the picture and when you look at his video, when he's out there, so many times you see ads of Jared Golden does this. He goes out on a boat and acts like I'm going to be a lobsterman for a day. This is what Plattner does for a living. Like, he's not acting. He's not just a one-day thing. There's something just so authentic about it. And I really feel like that's something that you either have it or you don't. And I certainly feel like Mamdani has it. Look, this past weekend, everything sucks, right? So Sunday, was I giddy over the scavenger hunt? I loved it. The scavenger hunt, for anyone listening, Zoran Mandami, they set up this scavenger hunt. They announced it on Saturday. They told people where to meet. You got a card. You had to go around the city. And it told the story of mayors, and it told the story of how he's not the youngest candidate. He's not the only DSA candidate, but it was a story. And you could just tell people love their city. And that's one thing I get from him is he's excited to do this because he loves New York and he wants to be New York's mayor because he loves the city and he loves the people and he wants to make life better for people. And I feel like that's just so valuable. And I think other politicians, somebody like and going back to Susan Collins, watching the videos of her in Searsport yesterday, she looked like she was just like, this was the most dreadful thing she's ever had to do. She had to listen to her voters. Can you imagine that? That's what pays you. That's what you're there for. Anyways, it's a pet peeve of mine.
My only dog in the hunt in Maine is that hopefully we put up someone who can win. So yeah. I don't know if that's Janet Mills or if that is Graham Plattner, but I have to say, I do relish the idea of a side-by-side debate of Susan Collins and Graham Plattner. Like, that just seems fun to me. I would watch that with some popcorn after my kids went to bed. So anyway, anybody else want to make a final point, or are we square?
You know what debate I wouldn't want to watch, and it actually matters to me, is a Cornyn Allred debate. Sorry.
Okay, that's fair.
I would watch a Paxton Allred debate at this point. Like, I don't know. I'm just thinking about this, like, who just loves the place that they're from? And I love the place that I'm from. And I know that I shouldn't be airing dirty laundry here, but Allred didn't even deign to show up in the flood zone after the Camp Mystic flood to, pass out water, check in how people were doing. And it's just like, dude, be helpful. You're likely not going to win anyway. So at least use the time that you have with the platform you have to be helpful. Anyway, that's my call to action for anyone that wants to run statewide anywhere.
Can I just say one thing too?
Yeah.
I hope that people who are running, like Sherrod Brown's running again, Allred's running again, don't run your 2024 campaign. It didn't work. Don't fall into that, 2024 New Dems mindset on, you're going to talk about border security. No, you don't. You have to talk about the $50 billion worth of concentration camps. That's what people are freaking out about. So get over 2024. You lost. Run the campaign for the moment we're in.
Okay. I mean, snaps
Love
on that or tiny claps or whatever it is, right? So we can't make a better end than that. So we're going to leave it there. I just want to say thank you, Joe, official friend of the pod, and Tory and Jenifer for a little inspo, because inspo is something I'm trying to work in, to be kind of like hip now because I'm getting old. Inspo in some dark times. So, and thank you to our listeners. Remember, recruit and review, recruit new listeners, recruit someone that doesn't listen to the show and be like, you got to listen to the show. This is where the best stuff happens. Our listenership continues to grow every month, slow but sure. And we like the steady growth. And with that, we will see you next Thursday. Until then, do good, be well, hug your loved ones, and tell your dog I say hi.